Well, good morning, everybody. I think we're still waiting for some people to join, but we'll start now. I'm Chris Bell, so welcome to the first of CSP's virtual sessions for LDF. This morning, we're going to be having a bit of a chat about software as a service and the security aspects of it, and perhaps thinking of ways we can make use of it in a secure manner. So you'll see on the screen potentially a young lady called Natalie, who's actually running this, and she's the brains behind it all. So if I get a bit stuck, it's going to be Nat that's going to sort things out.
Morning, everyone.
So with that in mind, we'll kick off. So I think the first thing we'll do is just do a quick review of the characteristics of any cloud service, be it SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure, or even some of the sweeter ones like security. NIST, who I always go to a lot as the basics for a lot of things, they've got a very simple definition of what the characteristics are, which is up there. So all cloud services are on a demand self-service type operation. So you wouldn't be expecting to spend loads of time trying to get a service instantiated or expanded or even relax a little bit. It is there for you as a consumer to easily engage and easily provide. Broad network access, the idea is the cloud, it's a bit martini computing, so it's anytime, anywhere. And basically, once your service is live within the cloud, generally, it's open to anybody that's in this particular model on the internet. Resource pooling, this is where you are actually sharing resources with other people and applications that are provided by the actual application supplier. Obviously, to make the best use of the infrastructure cost, management costs, etc., that you don't actually pay for. It's part of your on-demand and your pay-as-you-go charging model. And to actually support, the charging model, we have it's measured service. So everything you're using within a cloud service should be measured, and you as consumers should be easily able to see what you've used and what you've been charged for it. And the other bit is the elasticity. When I said before about it shouldn't take an awful lot of time or effort to actually instantiate or expand your cloud capacity, neither should it take a lot of time or effort to reduce it to bring it in line with what you need. And the ISO standard does add another characteristic to it, which is multi-tenancy, which is fair enough. But one thing that I remember from a while ago, and it was a very wise colleague of mine, she described cloud as somebody else's computer connected to the internet. And I think that's, for a lot of the things, that's probably a very good basic definition of what cloud's about. Another bit of a review sort of thing, and people will get bored seeing these things, but this is about the idea of the shared responsibility model. When you're consuming any kind of cloud service, there's a shared responsibility between you and the consumer and the cloud provider to actually make sure that the system and services are secure. As you go up the stack, the cloud provider tends to be more responsible, and you become less responsible, but at no point in this model can you as a consumer say it's not my problem. You will always be left with something that is your responsibility. So if you start at the bottom, the actual hardware that actually run the applications, that will always be the responsibility of the provider. So when you're using an infrastructure as a service where you're getting a bit of virtual machines and a bit of virtual networking, the actual physicality providing that for you is not your issue. However, the operating system and above the operating system is something you have to be worried about. When you move up the stack towards PaaS, it's the middleware. It is the platform that is being provided by the supplier. So they will provide you with the operating system and the environments to actually execute your code that you're developing. They will also probably provide you with a shared database service, etc. But you're still responsible for the secure use of that environment, how you put stuff in, how you write your code, all the things that you're putting into it, you're still accountable and responsible for. When we go to my favorite, which is up at the application layer and software as a service, you're not responsible for anything below that. So the patching of the infrastructure, the provision of the infrastructure, to some extent, to a greater extent, the monitoring of the infrastructure and application services, everything, it's not your issue. However, your secure use of the application is down to you. So where you can actually create accounts, where you can actually put data into the application, these are your choices on who you grant access to that particular bit of the application that you're using and the data elements that you're happy to have hosted within it. And I think we've just said that really. I have just defined the SaaS characteristics. And it's basically about you making use of an application provided by somebody else on a pay-as-you-go service. The general idea behind it is it can access in broadly two ways. You can have a very thin client, such as a browser, or when you're actually using it to talk to other application sets, there'd be an API, a programmatic interface, application programmable interface, to actually consume the services from that SaaS service. Both ideas are very thin. Both things mean that when you're actually making a request to the application, it is entirely executed within the cloud provider's platform. Some of our clients will actually use multiple SaaS implementations to basically provide the business services that they need. And this is a bit of a generic diagram to show how this can be done. So we've taken in this three typical SaaS type applications. So we've got Office 365, which I'm sure everybody's aware of, which is Microsoft's offering for, well, many things. It includes desktop packages that you can run in the cloud, but it also includes things like SharePoint, email, and lots of other services that can be consumed on a SaaS basis. SageMaker. SageMaker is an AWS SaaS service that you use for big data and data analytics. Xero is another common SaaS service that businesses use for their accounting and some of their business management type applications. All these applications are available through the internet. So when you're accessing them, it could be from a corporate device that's connected directly to the internet. It could be from a corporate device that's within your corporate environment, flowing basically via your perimeter control to the internet. Or you may have a policy where you allow users to bring their own devices and still consume business services on those devices. So there's a plethora of ways to actually access these things, but they all they all sit there on the internet for you to grant or deny access to and stick data in. So we've just briefly and very briefly run through the idea of SaaS. It's there, it's run for you. You don't have to do much with it apart from worry about the application. You generally don't have to download anything to your desktops because you can run it all within the cloud. So why isn't it the perfect solution for everything? Well, one answer is that you can't get all the capabilities you need as a SaaS platform, but there are other reasons as well. As I alluded to before, although the SaaS supplier is responsible for making sure that the application works, that it is patched, it is maintained, that it is secure at an infrastructure and application type level, they will meet the contractual requirement that you've signed up with them, and only meet that contractual requirement. And generally, they will put the onus on you as a consumer to make sure that you're happy with, excuse me, the security characteristics and security accreditations that they publish, and that you are happy that the level of information and the capabilities of the application to protect that information are adequate for your needs, which is summarized as, sorry. So basic, oh, sorry, I missed a slide there. So sorry, basically they provide the ability to use stuff. How you use it is down to you. Another thing to think about when we're talking about SaaS is the attack surface, or I think probably more the attack surface that you have some control over. If you think about IaaS, where you're sharing basically the physical hardware with somebody, but the virtual machines and the virtual infrastructure that's provided to you gives quite a robust and controlled environment for you to actually build your applications and stuff in. The attack surface is quite small. When you start using an IaaS service to build an internet-facing application, etc., then the attack surface basically goes up in a very similar manner to what you've got with SaaS. However, you actually are well aware of the controls that you've put in place and that you're exercising right up that stack. Whereas within SaaS, you're told about the controls are assured, but they're not yours. You don't have that much visibility. And the same model works up as you go through a platform as a service. Once again, the controls that that are applied to the underlying platform are not yours. You can still put your application controls in as you build it up, but they're not yours. So some people say they describe saying the attack surface increases. As I said, I tend to say in reality, the attack surface that you control increases, or don't control increases, or your control of it decreases, probably better. And also, he said the cloud, you're still responsible for meeting legal and regulatory and internal policy requirements. The cloud provider is only responsible for making sure he meets his contractual requirement. Another point with this is, as I said, you don't have that much visibility of how things are actually architected. This stuff that's published, and there are things like security centers that a lot of these major applications provide for you to review. And there are also external accreditations, but it's not yours. It's not your assurance. It's not assurance being granted by your own ability to test and things. And also lack of control. When you're working for a large organization, and I've been in this position, the sort of security community within the organization, the security architects, don't always like giving control to a third party that they can't actually touch and feel, or at least get some view into. And I have found that trying to get things approved through various approval panels can sometimes be difficult when it's SaaS, because of this idea of attestation, external attestation. So, we're not bad for time. There is some good practice that can be applied in making use and secure use of a SaaS service. I will always recommend you carry out a risk assessment, and the risk assessment has to be focused on your specific use case of that service. Office 365 to me is an excellent example. Office 365 is a suite of capabilities, and they get badged different ways by Microsoft depending what products that you actually take. So it's really important that you understand whether your use case is, I'm going to use it for a bit of word processing and a bit of PowerPoint, or I'm going to use their SharePoint installation with Teams and fully integrate all my applications, all my data analytics, etc., all within this platform. So when people say, for instance, we've done a risk assessment on Office 365, my first question is, show me the scope of your assessment, and let's see how we match that to your use case of that particular service. The other thing is to make sure that even though it's software as a service, you can still apply the sound architectural principles that we would in any other solution. So make sure you understand the business requirement. Make sure you understand how the services you are choosing to actually deliver to meet that requirement dovetail into a wider strategy, dovetail into your wider authentication, authorization, and audit model that you have that you actually have as an organization. All the good things to make sure you get an architected solution. And also, there's plenty of advice and guidance around on the best use and of these sorts of applications and how you would secure them, and basically how you try and reduce the risk of using them. NCSC provides generic guidance regarding SaaS services, but they've also done some specific reviews based on their cloud security principles, and they've actually brought out some other guidance related to those, which is particular for SaaS, and they've looked at a few what they see as key or well-used business applications and given it a bit of a tick list about where it meets some of those requirements. And obviously, suppliers themselves offer advice. Listen to them. You know, if you've got a major contract and you're going to a major SaaS supplier, talk to them about how you can, with your use cases, how you can make best use of their services, and how you can make sure that they're secure enough for you and what you need to do. And as I said, that security bit comes all the way back to making sure you've got a reasonable risk assessment that's accurate. Once again, it's a bit more about making sure that the SaaS provider is secure enough for what you do. They will have the more reputable ones, all the reputable ones, will have some kind of external validation done. So it'll be 27001, it'll be SOC type reports. There'll be various, they may publish summarized ITHC pen test reports. There's things they will try and do to make their consumers feel comfortable with using their services. Make use of them. But once again, I will always couch that with, when you're reading these things and looking at what external validation has been granted and the scope of that validation and what is actually being examined, make sure it matches your use case. In reality, I looked for one service was provided by a supplier to a client, and they were very, very strong in saying they've got SOC reports and the big tick. And when I actually examined what had been attested to and what had been examined by the SOC auditors, it didn't quite match the services that had been purchased. So I sound like a stuck record, but only because I've been burnt myself. Make sure scope of what you are saying, the accreditation and the assurance you're getting from it does match the use case that you want to apply. On a more technical note, when you're using multiple, especially when you're using multiple SaaS providers, a lot will have their own security characteristics that you can apply. You can, depending what the service is, you can put filters on, you can put rules, etc. You could put, rather than, you can use things like attribute-based security rather than just role-based access. So where connections are coming from, is it being there frequently, etc. There's various patterns that can generate to say whether users of your service are either malicious attacks or they're using it internally, say out of hours, different timelines to what they normally use. There are various things you can know about the use case of that service that some suppliers provide. However, not all providers are equal. One way to actually give certainly a consistent top level, granular level of policy applied to using SaaS or any cloud service really is to use a technology such as a CASB, where a device either on-prem, depending on your architecture, or in the cloud, actually provides some policy control between your consumers and the cloud providers. You can define rules there. So if you've got particularly sensitive data, or you don't want BYOD devices to access particular cloud providers because of the data they hold, you can do a lot of this using CASB and the CASB type services. Just be aware once again of what functionality you're using in that security stack. The Office 365 and Microsoft don't like the proxy type CASB. They're happy with an API model where you're actually consuming cloud service through an API, and the CASB looks at the API calls and sort of applies policy to that. Other ones don't care at all. There are, once again, this is a stuck record bit, it's your use case for your cloud provider and what you can apply between you and them that meets the requirement you feel comfortable with for security and assurance without impacting your ability to use a service. And also for the larger organizations, when you're using mixed environments, whether it's host-based, ISO, PaaS, API-based CASBs are a good idea, or that functionality to actually examine API calls and make sure when they're communicating between these different services, they are behaving and doing what you expect them to do. So we saw that early diagram where we've basically got users using the SaaS services. This is another very poor diagram because it's not in color, but it shows the sort of model you can go for. We've got the various consumer devices that would actually use a CASB before they went out to use the services, and also where you've got a corporate network and you're using infrastructure services. This stuff can all be linked to a common policy set, and so essentially you're managing top level policies in one place where you can do so. Otherwise, it can get very, very, very difficult to ensure consistency across multiple providers. That doesn't mean that you don't use what's available by the actual providers themselves, because we like a bit of defense in depth, but the sort, if you like, the baseline should be applied to all consistently, and the way to apply that easily is by having that policy applied outside their environment. Other thing we said about techies and various people not being happy because they can't see the ins and outs of what's going off within the environment. So become familiar with the logging, audit, compliance provided by the supplier. These can be as simple as you go to one of the control panel websites and they'll tell you about what's been happening with transactions, who's logged in, who's logged in at different hours. what things they've accessed, what they've done with it, etc. These are all things that can be seen from the control panels within the providers. Some providers also provide you with the necessary APIs, so you can actually integrate some of these things into the visibility within your corporate environment. Certainly large organizations we work with, that's what they want to do. Because once again, when you're worrying about security across what you've got on-prem, what you've got in IaaS, what you've got in different cloud IaaS providers, and then we then start using, I don't know, they will go to a big data analytics provider that all this stuff needs to talk to. As I said, the engineers and the architects can get very nervous. One way around that is to make sure that all that visibility is brought into one place, and that you've got the ability as an organization to see what's happening to your data and to your services holistically, without trying to go into every one and log on and try and work it out. So just an example, we talked about Office 365. We use Office 365. We use other ones as well, but we do use 365. And this is the compliance center screen from 365. As you can see, if you look down the left-hand side, there are lots of things that you can look at in this. So Microsoft are good in this space. They've got a lot of investment in it, and they want 365 to be used a lot. So they try and give you some visibility into what's happening. They allow you to set policies on data, and just generally let you get the feeling that you're controlling a lot of what's happening with your data. And to go to the last point that I made, Microsoft also allow APIs to collect some of this information as well. So Splunk is a well-known SIEM type solution that people use, and they publish this so that the APIs are available, and this is from Splunk themselves and how they would use their plugin to actually pull data out of 365, which can be consumed by other systems for the analysis and the pattern recognition of things that they need to actually make sure that they feel comfortable with the visibility they've got of their solutions. That was a very, very fast work through. So we've got some time for Q&A now, Nat. So how do we want to do this, Natalie?
So if anybody's got a question, you can either raise your hand and then I'll allow you to talk, or you can just put it in the chat or in the Q&A box. So loads of options there. If anyone's got any questions for Chris, please send them through to us now. So I'll just read this one for you, Chris. So you talked about using a number of apps to create a business solution. Yeah. Could you explain how attestation works across several suppliers? Or how about if, for instance, you wanted to add a relatively unknown app to a set of larger well-known apps? What would you think about using a service like, I think it's Zapier, to connect apps?
I think what you look at is the destination of where you're going. It goes back to the same rules I said before. What are the risks? What are the risks with using these as individuals? So if depending what the app's going to do, let's take an example. So we've got SageMaker. SageMaker is an analytics tool. If we're just going to pull out, say, from Office 365 into SageMaker, some user data about how many emails have been sent on a particular day, then the risks involved in releasing that data to SageMaker are probably quite low. If we want to actually use one of our on-prem services and say we've got a load of personal data and we want to use SageMaker to look for analytics within that, then we look at the risks associated with putting that data into SageMaker. The actual connectivity bit and how you put things together is more about how is your joining component actually securing that data between these particular transactions and between how these services interoperate. So you look at it in two ways. You look at where it's going and the data and the use case for that, and also make sure, for instance, very simple things like whatever service you're using in between is secure enough anyway. So does it authenticate each connection? Does it authenticate each transaction? Can you get audit logs from it? Is it all done TLS'd up, secured, etc.? So you to me, it's back to the architecting bit. And you assemble your solution, including the interconnectivity piece and the bridging piece, based on the same principles. Does that answer the question, or did it go off at a complete tangent and not answer the question?
I think that answered the question for that one. At the moment, that's the only question I've got. I think if anybody else has got anything, again, you can raise your hand virtually, and then I can allow you to talk, or you can just type it in. But yeah, so that's that question done.
Right.
Yeah, I've not had anything else through, Chris. So.
Right. Did we do the questions we've got?
So I am just going to launch a poll. So if everyone could just answer, it's a really simple single choice poll. So I'll just launch that now. So you should all see that. And if you could just answer that for us, that'd be great. So I'll give it a few more minutes, see if anybody else wants to ask a question. So
Is that it then, Natalie?
Yeah, I'm just checking. So people answering the poll, but I haven't got any questions at the moment. Any more questions? So if everyone's happy with that.
Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been at least a little bit useful. If you go away and think you've got any questions do come up, please, do we have an email address for these?
Yeah, if you go on the next slide, Chris, our emails, our contact details should be on there.
That's Natalie telling me off that to go on to the next slide.
So everyone can see if they want to get in touch. I have just had one last minute question in.
Okay.
If you want to answer that. So would you recommend that a small company minimizes the number of SaaS providers or consolidates if they already have several?
Yes, because you pick the one that does the best thing for you, because the more you have, the more difficult it is to actually make sure that you know what's happening with your information and they're being used appropriately and securely. So yes, I would recommend, if you're small and you haven't got the resources to actually have the full service wrap yourselves around stuff, yeah, don't have too many.
I think that's about it now, Chris.
Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And I hope, when's the next one? The people less boring than me talking, aren't they?
We've got Securing the Cloud tomorrow. And then we start again on Monday with risk management. Then we've got Kevin's how to deal with cybersecurity questions in tenders. And then we have our last event next Thursday, which is our in-person Life's a Breach. So that's where you've got to figure out who's done the cyber attack. But yeah, so that's all our events this coming week and next week.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. And hope to speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.